Kia ora guys, thanks for joining me for the little lounge. Today we'll be covering lineout and quick throw. As always, we take our references from many different sources. Today we touch on Law 18, which covers everything to do with touch, quick throw and lineouts. Also the definitions of the World Rugby laws of the game. We also refer to some New Zealand Rugby domestic safety law variations, and of course a great resource for all of the above, and for a bit of extra is our Bay of Plenty Rugby website. We have sections there for the laws, education, and the introduction to rugby refereeing course as well. So starting off with quick throws, the point of a quick throw is to, quick throws and lineouts, their methods of restarting the game after the ball's gone into touch. So we look at the definitions. A quick throw definition is a throw from touch taken before the lineout is formed. Pretty key thought around that, before the lineout is formed. We'll talk about that soon. The ball is thrown in by the team that would have thrown the ball into the lineout. And we have the mark of touch definition. And this is the mark of touch is something that we'll be touching on a few times throughout the day today. Mark of touch is basically where the throw can be taken from. It's an imaginary line in the field of play at right angles to the touch line, from where the ball can be thrown in. Note that this can't be within 5 meters of any goal line. So it can't be within 5 meters of an attacking goal line or a defending goal line, either or. And it comes in handy when talking about quick throws and lineouts, so it's a pretty important reference for us. So, quick throw taken between the mark of touch, the player's own goal line, gets to go backwards or parallel to their own goal line as well, and traveling 5 meters. So it must travel 5 meters before it hits the ground or a player. This is pretty key. This is in relation to being played at by the throwing team's own team. So all of these sanctions for the above are options of the lineout or scrum. So if any of these are not done, then it's an option of lineout or scrum. However, if it's taken ahead of the mark of touch, then the throw doesn't count. We just bring it back to have a lineout where at the mark of touch. So that's not a sanctionable offence. The key thing about the 5 meter mark is if it's thrown into a player who's not doing anything intentional to put himself in the way, so an opposition player, and it's thrown in directly at them, then again that's on the thrower to avoid that player, and it's an option of lineout scrum to the opposition, and then we'll go into what happens with actions of the opposition next. So the opposition at a quick throw. So the key thing is here they cannot block or prevent a quick throw from being taken, or play the ball before it's thrown 5 meters. So this is now on the actual actions of those opposition players. So if they do block this throw, if they get in the way intentionally, if they're stopping the ball from being thrown meters or thrown it at all, that's when it's a free kick. Okay, so it's a difference between the two of them. But this is an action which stops the throw from going in. The other one is an action whereby the throw just doesn't make it 5 meters, and that's the key difference. Also, the ball carrier must release the ball immediately as they carry it into touch. Here's a good example of the ball carrier releasing it immediately. But you'll see there was an infringement as well. You might have picked it up. Click through the replay. So they retrieve the ball, all good, quick throw taken, but it's taken within 5 meters of a lineout and it's gone forward. So they can't take that within 5 meters of the opposition lineout. Of the goal line, sorry. However, they could have taken it within 5, if they're back on their own defending line, they could have taken it within 5 meters of their own goal line. Hopefully that clarification makes sense. Okay. Also, if an opposition player doesn't release the ball to enable a free kick, enable a quick throw being taken, then that is a penalisable offence. Penalties taken 15 metres in from touch. Is when can a quick throw not be taken? So quick throw is disallowed if the lineout's already formed. It will go into formation of a lineout soon. But if it's already been touched by anyone, so this is a person touching it, other than the player throwing in or the player who carried the ball into touch. So the key consideration with this is that if a player who carried the ball into touch intentionally throws it to someone else, that could be considered throwing the ball away, and that's a penalisable offence as well. So they're required just to place the ball down or hand the ball over. Or if the different ball's used, you also cannot have a quick throw. Okay, into our lineouts. So lineout is a set piece. It has at least 2 players from each team waiting to receive the throw from touch, and that's key. Is not 2 participants of a lineout. It's 2 players from each team waiting to receive a throw. Players milling around or just in the general area are not considered to be part of the lineout. They have to be near the mark of touch, waiting to receive a throw. And also, just for clarity, directly into touch, that means that the ball goes into touch without first landing on the playing area or touching the player or the referee. And that'll be a pretty key consideration for our next few points as we dive into how and when and where a throw is taken. So, who throws the ball in? And if you look at the law book, it's a very large table which has a massive breakdown of all the different scenarios in which the ball goes into touch. I'm going to try and break it down into general rules and trends and things like that to help us understand. So the general rule, the opposition to whoever last touched the ball throws into the line out. That'll see you right most of the time. And just to clarify that a little bit more, so if a player who's in touch, if they catch a ball which hasn't yet reached the plane of touch, so the player has to be in touch themselves, and the ball hasn't actually got to the plane of touch just yet, then that player has deemed to have last touched the ball. So they're the ones that has last touched the ball when it's been in the field of play, and they're the ones that's taken it into touch. So that's a pretty key consideration. So the only time that the opposition don't throw the ball in is when there's a penalty kick, the kicking team throw into the line out. You'll see here a free kick. So a mark is awarded, free kick is taken. This is not a penalty kick. Player is inside their own 22. And he elects a kick for touch. So free kick only, opposition throw into the line out. Cool. Just have a look at a little clip here. This one highlights the key point I made earlier. This is about the plane of touch. So have a look and see if you can pick who has taken this ball into touch, whose throw it is. You can see here, green has kicked the ball up the field. The player in touch has caught the ball. The ball has not yet reached the plane of touch yet. That's the imaginary line going up directly up into vertical space above the touch line, which means that number 15, white, has taken the ball into touch. This was a law that was amended in 2017 and still catches a few players out. So where does the lineup form? Again, this is part of the large rubric of decisions within the law book. So try and generalize this a little bit. In general play, so if the ball goes indirectly into touch, Okay, so lineout's formed at the mark of touch. So we're going to look at how the ball got to the touchline, as where it forms. So if the ball goes indirectly into the touch, so on the bounce, or is accidentally thrown into touch, because of course you can't throw it into touch intentionally, or if a player who's holding the ball, if they go into touch as well, then the mark of touch is wherever that happens. Any of those scenarios, that's where the mark of touch for those. Note there are options available to some of those. So like if you knock it on into touch, there's an option of a line out or a scrum. The line out's always where it goes into touch. A scrum would always be back where you would have a scrum for the knock on, as an example. But dive into that more in scrum law. So if a ball hits a player and goes straight into touch, or it goes straight into touch from a dropout kick, or a 20 or a halfway or a kickoff restart, or it's kicked directly into touch from outside the kicker's 22, that's on the full and not at the penalty. And the mark of touch is wherever the ball either reaches the touchline or in line where it last contacted a player. And I've tried to summarize that as much as I could. So the last place where it touched a player is where the mark is, or whichever of those is closest to the goal line. So if you can imagine a 22-meter drop kick, it goes out and touch on the full, but the wind is blowing pretty strong and it blows it backwards, and let's say it goes out 10 meters from the kicker's own goal line, then the mark of touch would be 10 meters from the kicker's own goal line, because that's the closest point to that player's goal line. And here we go over the concept of gain and ground and no gain and ground. So this is relating to the 22-meter line. So no gain and ground. This is where we have a ball that's where the defending team's taken the ball back inside the 22. Once they've taken it back in there, it doesn't matter how that play started. If there's no tackle, there's no ruck or maul, and no one from the opposition touches the ball, or if they pick up or catch the ball, even if they're inside their own 22 themselves, but the ball is not yet inside the 22, and that's a bit like the touchline. A player in touch sort of grabbing the ball before it's reached that plane. So if the ball has not yet reached that plane and the player inside the 22 picks it up and pulls it in there, then they are the ones that have taken it back in there. Okay. So if any of that happens, then any kick from touch results in a 22, results in the line out mark of touch being in line with wherever the kicker kicked it from, or the goal line, whichever's closest. So either the mark of touch is where it goes out, or where the kicker kicked it from, whichever's kicker closest to the goal line. I imagine it only results in a really bad kick or a really windy day for it to be anything other than where he kicked it from. You can see here in the diagram, even from lineouts and scrums. So if there's a line out which has a mark of touch outside the 22, or if there's a scrum where the center point mark the scrum, not where the hind feet are, not where the halfback standing, or not where the halfback retrieves the ball. It's where the original mark for the scrum is. If that is outside of the 22, and then the ball's taken back in, then this rule applies. And here we have a gain and ground. So this is where if the defending team didn't take the ball into 22, or if they did, and then there was a tackle, ruck, or maul, or if the opponents touch it at some point within the 22, then we have what we call a gain and ground. This means that the defending team can clear it, they can kick it, and if it goes out on the full or not on the full or whatever, then wherever the ball reaches the touchline is where we have our mark of touch. Okay, hopefully that sort of summarizes who and where we throw it succinctly enough. Okay, now we have forming a line out itself. So all of the sanctions for any infringements here are free kick unless stated otherwise. So when forming a line out, the throwing team, they determine the numbers. Forming a line out, you have to have a minimum of 2 players from each team, and we'll get into DSLVs later. The non-throwing team can have less. They can have as many players so long as they have at least 2. Once throwing team players join the line out, they cannot leave. So they can't come to the line of touch, the mark of touch, and then leave the line out. The non-throwing team, though, they can leave, but only if they're matching numbers. So they can't, if they've got equal numbers or less numbers, they can't then have some players just leave randomly. Again, that's an infringement. However, if they've got more numbers in the throwing team, and the line-out gets set straight away and the throw is taken straight away, then we're not going to call an infringement on the non-throwing team. So they've had no opportunity to set numbers. This is when, in terms of application, this is a good one to talk about with your teams, either prior to a game or prior to the first line out. I know that sometimes I have teams that delay the forming of a line out. They might not delay, but they'll just come up quite slowly, and then they'll bring their whole line up, and the second they get there, they'll throw straight away. Well, really, the line out isn't formed until they've got their players there. And then if they're taking that throw straight away, the opposition have no opportunity to match the numbers. And I always tell teams that if you're gonna throw straight away once you got your guys to the line, then I'm not gonna penalise the other guys for not getting rid of their numbers. That's a key game management thing to work on sometimes, if some players are getting shirty about it. Receivers are optional, so the team doesn't have to have a receiver, but they can, if they do choose to have one, they can only have one per team. They can't have two. Again, the sanction is a free kick when forming a line out if they have more than one receiver. And another key one is participants can actually swap places before the ball's thrown. So the thing is, they can't, if there's a receiver and the ball's getting ready to be thrown, that receiver can't come in and join the line out and then no one drop back into the receiver role. There's no swap. That's just one person moving from one position to another. So the participant has to change places with another participant from their own team in order for that to happen. And then there's also no lifting or jumping prior to the line out starting, and this is always an interesting one to manage, and this is a real game management type thing. Particularly, you have to have a real clear set in your mind as to what you consider to be no lifting prior to a line out starting, and communicate that standard really clearly with the players if it is becoming an issue. And lastly, there's no contact with an opponent before the ball thrown. This is the only one of the above that actually has a penalty as a sanction instead of a free kick. Okay, the physical forming of a lineout. So lineouts really should be formed without delay. Again, how you manage that is up to you. But if teams are holding back and not bringing their players to the mark of touch, then it's up to you to manage that team, and how you do that is up to you. But really, it should be without delay. So they form single lines at the mark of touch. Those single lines are between the 5 metre and the 15 metre line. They must maintain a ½ metre gap either side of the mark of touch. So between the two teams, there should be at least a metre. I'd say as referees, you probably should be aiming for a wider than that, probably up to 1.5 metres to maintain a good gap. So that the wider the gap, really, the easier it is to manage that line out. But if you got a throwing team who's setting themselves, 70 or 80 centimeters back from the mark of touch, you've got to make sure that management-wise, you're not letting the receiving team creep forward as well. They must maintain their ½ metre gap from the mark of touch. The receiver, if it's in place or they choose to have one, they have to be 2 meters away from the line out. So that's the players in the line out, not the mark of touch. They can't stand 5-6 meters back, sort of in no man's land. They can't be right up in amongst their teammates either. There must be a clear gap, 2 meter gap between them and their teammates. And the throw is opposite. Make sure you get this person set. They have to stand 2 by 2. So that's 2 meters from the 5 meter line and 2 meters from the mark of touch. If you're lining yourself up, then you might want to stand 2 by 2 on the other side. Is usually a good position to stand if you're standing near the front of the lineout. You have good peripheral vision of both the participants and the thrower. And non-participants, anyone not part of the lineout, they have to remain 10 metres from the mark of touch. And we'll go into what offside looks like a bit later on. That's probably the more complicated side of things. Okay, getting the ball into the lineout, throwing in. So all the sanctions here are an option of a lineout or a scrum unless they're stated. Okay, so the player throwing must stand and touch. If they have their feet in, again, it's an incorrect throw. Again, something to manage. Probably not something you blow every time. If you notice it, or if your assistant referee notices it, or you are an assistant referee who notices it, that would be a good conversation to have, maybe ahead of the next line out, just reminding the player of their obligations to stay in touch when they're throwing the ball. This is a practical refereeing type viewpoint. The throw must be straight. So again, straight. If the law book actually does say along the mark of touch. Again, from a practical refereeing viewpoint, it's generally accepted that if the ball's between the inside shoulders, so it's in that gap. So again, so looking at the shoulders, from the outside of that shoulder to the outside shoulder of the opposition, if it's in that tunnel, that tunnel is probably 50, 60 centimeters wide, then that's considered to be straight, because then both teams have a pretty clear shot of playing that. One thing to consider though, if you have allowed a wider gap, just be mindful of that, because if you have allowed an attacking team or a throwing team to set their line out, a metre away from the mark of touch, and if they're throwing it straight at the inside shoulder of their own team, then really actually that ball's gone quite a bit towards their side, and the opposition probably doesn't have much of a chance of contesting it. So just bear that in mind. It really should be between the inside shoulders of those players when they are set up half a metre away from the mark of touch. And also be considerate of the weather conditions too, and that's a game management type thing, and something that you can really draw a line on is what you are deeming to be straight, not straight. And in my experience, this is always best for a referee to take control of, rather than delegating that to an assistant referee. An assistant referee has much better view of other parts of the lineout, particularly to do with contact in the air, ball not travelling 5, and offsides around the backside of the lineout. So for clarity and for consistency, it's usually a good referee type decision to make. The thrower can't delay the throw, nor can they pretend to throw the ball, also known as balking. Those ones, though, are free kicks. So if either of those happen, it's a free kick. Position for the scrums and the free kicks, always out on the 15-metre line from a line out. Okay, beginning and ending a line out. So I've done the transition backwards here, that's fine. Line out begins when the ball leaves the hands of the player throwing it in. So once that happens, line out begins. The quick line out itself is actually different to a quick throw. So a quick line out is actually when the line out's already set, but the ball's thrown in quickly, usually straight away once the line out's set. Normal line out rules still apply, so people might still be milling around. Opposition might be trying to get themselves sorted, but they get the ball in. Again, if it happens so quickly that the opposition have no chance to react, then you're not going to ping them for things like numbers. Line out's over though. So once the ball itself is either knocked back from the line out, or a player who has the ball once they leave the line out, or if it goes past the 15-metre line, or if it comes back in where the 5-metre area is, again, that's the line out's over as well. But if a ruck or more forms from the line out itself, so directly taken down and formed from the line out, it's not until all the feet of the players in that ruck or more move beyond the mark of touch. So quite a bit, even like, so sometimes a tackle might occur and the player might be tackled and fall sort of just past the mark of touch, but their players will bound on and form a ruck, and they might have some feet that are still behind the mark of touch. The lineout's still active, and that's a pretty key consideration, particularly when it comes to offsides. So again, if you're working with ARs, make sure that you have really good communication and clarity around when that lineout's over, or have some sort of signal, because if you have a far side AR calling offsides, then that can be something that can occur incorrectly if they can't quite see when the lineouts are over or not. Or if the ball becomes unplayable, that means the lineout's also over. Who participates in the lineout? So participants are defined as the players who line up in the lineout, the player who throws the ball in and their immediate opponent, and any player who takes up a position of a receiver. So they are all participants in the lineout. Non-participants are pretty much everyone else. They all need to be back 10 meters. So if they're not in any of those positions above, they're back 10. And if they're not, then they're penalised. They're offside. Cool. And what can people do in the lineout? Okay, so they can deflect, so catch or deflect the ball. They can use either arm to catch or to deflect the ball. However, the outside arm can only be used if both arms are above the head. So if they're raising both hands above the head, they can use the outside arm to deflect the ball. But if they're only raising one arm, then they cannot use their outside arm to deflect the ball. Okay. Again, sanctions for pretty much all of these are free kicks unless it involves some sort of contact. Also, actually, I'll just next bit. So you can lift to support a teammate jumping for the ball. You can pre-grip them before the line-out starts. You can lift them up once the line-out begins. Again, you must lower them safely. If not, then you can be free kicked. Not something that happens very often, but something to be aware of. If you're lifting or supporting a teammate, must be below the shorts if from behind, or below the thighs if from the front. That's just to do with that safety aspect again. Again, if that's not complied with, the free kick. No other players can be used as support when jumping. So you can be lifted, but you cannot take an action to use other players as support. And that's particularly to do with the opposition. You cannot use them to do that, or you cannot propel yourself off another player within the line out. It must be lifted or supported by that player, if that makes sense. And this is to do with the opposition. So holding, pushing, charging, obstructing, grasping any player not holding the ball. This is a general rugby law, but applies quite a bit in the line out, making sure that we're not touching anyone else, and that's a penalisable offence. Also to do that last one, that's to do with players in the air as well. If there is a player in the air with the ball, or the player in the air is protected, so the opposition cannot touch that player until they've hit the ground. Again, penalisable. And again, players can't stand with less than 5 meters or prevent the ball from being thrown. This is a bit like the quick throw law, preventing a ball from being thrown 5 meters. So if the opposition to the throw is stopping that ball from going in 5, then that's a free kick. So again, that's different to a ball not travelling 5 meters, either hitting the ground or not reaching the 5 meter line by the catching team playing it. However, if it's the opposition preventing it from going 5 or stopping it or being a general nuisance in there, then that's a free kick. Okay, offside of the line out. This is probably the one area that has the most details. So for this bit, I have actually, I think I put the slide in the wrong order, sorry. But just going back to, there we go. So just to summarize some of the actions at the line out. So no levering or pushing yourself off an opponent, holding or shoving any of that contact in the air or before that ball's being played, or charging any other player, or blocking a throw in any way. So that particularly a 2x2 hooker, if they're reaching right across, they can't be blocking that throw. They can create a nuisance of themselves and distract. It's not particularly fair, but it's something that sort of crept into the game quite a bit. But if they actually make contact with that ball before it goes 5, then it's a free kick. And lifting and supporting is fine, just not levering off anyone else. Okay, back to offside. So this is the part I've actually just taken straight from the law book. It was a lot of technicalities to summarize. So we'll go through it bit by bit and just make sure we're over it. So once that line out started, actions of the thrower and the thrower's opposite. So the person standing 2x2 and the thrower. So they have a lot of actions that they can take. It's just good to be really clear on what they can't do. So they can join the line out. They can go back to the offside line where the non-participants are 10 meters back. They can stay in that 5 meter zone and just basically stay where they are, or they can go into the receiver position. So but they can only go to that receiver position if it's empty. And that means if it's empty when the line out started. Okay, because that receiver can't come into the line out and make that position empty once the line out started. Okay, so that's a pretty key part. That's probably what we see probably the most common offence is that they'll go and stand in that receiver position, but there's already another one there, or the receiver left and went into the line out, and then the hooker went into the receiver. So just be mindful of that. A lot going on, but just be mindful. Anywhere else, they're offside. The line-out players must remain on their side of the mark of touch. So once the ball's been thrown and then touch the player or the ground, they have to stay there. They can't move across. If they do, they got to get back. So it's only if they are jumping across to try and catch the ball, then they can have to get back across. They can't move themselves by walking across or running across or anticipating and moving across that mark of touch. Okay, so if they're jumping for the ball and they don't get it and they land on the other side, all good, so long as they get straight back and don't interfere with play. But if they're just moving across that mark of touch, then they're offside and they're liable to be penalised. Let's just be mindful of that. That sort of just summarises what we've got above as well. So that offside line is the mark of touch. Once a ruck or a maul has formed, then we have the offside lines, the usual offside lines there. And if a ruck or maul hasn't formed yet, then once the ball's taken, even if the line out's still active, the offside line is through the ball. So that be mindful of that for players taking the ball in and down. And if it's still on the line out, sometimes you get players that sort of like to run out past it to try and intercept or tackle a receiver early. Okay, so be mindful that they run past that ball, then they're offside. That's one to watch out for, and that's probably one of the more common ones that teams get jumpy about. So once we have a ruck or maul, any participating player, they can join the ruck or maul, and that includes the hooker themselves, or the hooker's opposite, or they can retire to the offside line. So that's the hindmost for it. That's a normal offside line for ruck or maul. These are just participating players. Don't forget we defined the participating players before. And all the other players, non-participants, they've got to stay back 10 meters still until the line out's over. So everything we're talking about here is while the line out's still occurring. Once that ball's in, players can go past the 15-meter line, so they don't have to stay within the 15s. But if that ball doesn't reach them outside there, then they got to come straight back in. So let's say they're anticipating the ball's going to go way out over the back of the line out, they can run back past the 15-meter line to go and get it. But if it doesn't make it there, their obligation is to make it back into the line out. And by that same virtue, all the players not participating in the line out, they have to remain 10 metres back from the mark of touch. And I'll just bring up the next bit as well, because this relates to what we're just talking about. So if it is thrown past that 15 metre line, or they're anticipating that it is going to be thrown past that 15 metre line, players can move forward from that mark, from that 10 metre mark. So as soon as that ball's thrown, if they know it's going to be go past that 15 metre line, then they can come up straight away, even before that ball gets there. If the ball doesn't get there, again, just like our players in the line out, if the ball doesn't get to that 15 metre line and they've come up, they've got to get back straight away. That's both throwing teams players and non-throwing teams players. Okay, I think quite often we start to see creeping in that throwing teams players will come up early. So again, a management type thing. What are you going to do about it? If they're coming up and the opposition's coming up, you're certainly not going to penalise opposition for being offside. That's something to be very mindful of. It might be a conversation you have with the teams. And this is to do with quick lineouts. So that second to last point there. So if there's players still getting back, and that's, they haven't actually had a chance to get back that 10 metres just yet, so that a quick line out is taken, not a quick throw, quick line out. Then let's not penalise them, don't ping them. They still give them a chance to get back onside, so long as they are actually getting it back onside. However, they can't rejoin the game until they actually do get back to that 10 metre mark. They can't just turn around and come back up. Like, their own teammates can't put them onside. They've got to get all the way back and then come up. So that's one of the key areas of law that, they can't be put onside by actions of their own teammate or opposition. So just so you know that. Yeah. Cool. Yes, offside. That's our offside law there. Go through there. And last little section is our lineouts. So for DSLVs. So for junior rugby, no lifting. Anything under 13. Our lineouts are always 8 on 8 for under 12s and under 13s, and they're 5 on 5 for anything from under 8s and under 11s. The under 11s is new in law this year, given the changes to the field size and team playing numbers. And lineouts are not contested at under 10s and below. So under 11s will still contest lineouts. They just can't lift. They can just jump. They can jump from the ground. Anything under 10 and below, not contested. Ball thrown in. Team wins it unless they knock it on. Cool. All right. What we'll do now, guys, I'm pretty happy to take questions, have a bit of a chat. If there's anything that you've made notes of, you can just unmute yourselves and bring up anything, or any points from games or things that you've seen around the traps, or any little confusion. We can duck back in and check out the particular slides if you want.
Hey Cam, thanks for that. I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When the ball becomes unplayable.
Yeah. Okay, so that was to do
when the throw is taken.
When it's over. Okay, yeah. So that's to do with a that's just to do like with the typical tackle, ruck or maul.
Yeah. So whoever the throwing team is, the ball becomes the opposition's scrum feed. It
depends on what's happened. So if let's say a tackle occurs at the line out straight away,
yeah.
They all go to ground, and let's say the tackle is pinned. And so either a ruck's formed or it's still a tackle ball, then and the ball's unplayable, then it's still the position of the team. Okay. Although it does depend. So this is where the tackle, ruck and more unplayable laws come in.
Okay.
So you would normally say it's the position of the team who was last going forward. If they've taken that ball straight down from the line out, and they weren't going forward, and then the ball's become unplayable, neither team was going forward straight away before it became unplayable.
Yeah.
Therefore, it becomes the attacking team's ball.
Okay.
And the attacking team is the team who's half it's not. So it's a team whose half it's not in. So let's say the ball's in, it's red throw into the line out, but they're in their own half, they're inside their 22. They're taking the ball down, ball's unplayable, there was no penalisable offence, no one's going forward, it becomes the opposition's ball because they're not the attacking team, they're the defending team.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where the attacking and defending needs to be used really carefully, because you can still be the defending team but have possession of the ball. Yeah, it just depends on which half you're in. If you're in your own half, you're defending. If you're in the opposition half, you're attacking.
How often does that happen though?
Almost never. Because normally you'll get a little bit of movement past the mark of touch.
Yeah.
Or someone's lying over it and it's actually, you can actually see that it's a penalisable offence. But yeah, like it very rarely just goes straight to ground and then killed. Straight from a line out. I can't remember the last time I saw it. But you know, it's there in law.
Yeah.
Although from a maul, of course, all your maul, your typical maul laws apply, because for a maul to occur, you have to have movement towards a goal line. So there has to be a movement either way. So if a maul collapses and it's no one's fault, then of course the ball's handed over to whoever didn't take the ball into the maul.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. That's all.
If that's all, then that's great. Yeah. No, it's the lineouts. There's a lot of little technical laws in the lineout. A lot of it just comes down to management, because standing there when you're standing in lineout and looking at it all, it's very hard to be able to police every single one of those laws. And I think if you were to police every single one of those laws, you might get a bit of ire from the players as well, if you were to ping them on every little thing. So I mentioned that there are a couple of them are really just management things. If they get infringed, it's probably best to have a conversation if you notice it, rather than blow your whistle. Because really some of them are things that, does it have has it had a big effect on play? Is one team really getting an advantage from it by doing it? And that's little things like taking half a step into the field of play when throwing the ball in. If you notice it, have a chat. If they do it again, ping them. That kind of thing. But yeah, I don't think players will certainly expect that if you've talked to them about something already and they do it again, then they will certainly expect to be disciplined if you catch them doing it again. But yeah, I guess the key thing is just first, number one, safety. If it looks unsafe, that's protecting the jumpers and whatnot in the air. It looks complicated. Like if there's players moving everywhere, it can be when it can get really frazzling and frustrating, and trying to think, right, who's supposed to be where. Let me just show you one clip, and I was hesitant about putting this in, but I'm going to show you now. I'm still sharing my screen, right?
Yep, you are.
Yeah. Okay. So this is from the formation of the lineout. Yeah, this is the one. Okay. Show you this clip here. So again, a lot of movement, and you see this quite a bit in particularly high grades. The lineout is beautifully set. The receiver's standing there a couple meters away, probably a little close, but yep. And before the ball's thrown, that receiver starts running in towards the line, and that's okay if they were just doing a straight swap with another player. Now you see one player does come out, number 3 starts coming out, but they don't really move into a receiver position. They just sort of stand there, and actually she sort of still acts as part of that line. So she hasn't clearly moved back into a receiver position. So there was no swap. They had a receiver in place, and then they didn't have a receiver. So that becomes a free kick, that kind of thing there. yeah, again, it's probably just one thing to manage is that whole receiver issue. Yeah, probably the two big things are the receiver issue. So is there a receiver? Who are they? And if there's no receiver, who can go there? And then the other one is the offsides. So that's about having players not running past. There we go. I think it's this one. Just managing the offsides of the players in the line out. All right, so let me just point out some of the things done well and things probably not done so well here. So red team throwing the ball. Where's their receiver? Well, he looks like he's about 5 or 6 meters back. That's probably not a great position for him to be in, but probably something just to manage at the next line out. Probably 2 to 4 meters is probably good. It should be 2 meters though. Anything more than that, and it starts becoming quite challenging to know who's your receiver, who's actually a retired player, non-participant, I should say. The ball in, marginally straight. So here we go. This is a really good view of it. So the ball is still not, the lineout is not yet over. But the ball has been played. So the offside line is no longer the mark of touch. The offside line now runs directly through the ball, parallel. You can see the green player with the white headgear, the one closest to the red halfback. They've gone past the ball. So before it's been offloaded, the ball's still in the lineout still formed. Offside line goes through the ball. Green player's already gone past the ball before it's played. So they have come from an offside position. And yeah, and the referee, there we go. The referee's picked it up and come back across. Note that the penalty, if it's a player who's part of the lineout and they're offside, the mark for the penalty is on the mark of touch. Oh, sorry, at the place of infringement, but 15 meters in. If they were a non-participant, if they were supposed to be back 10 meters and they've come up early and they're offside from there, the mark for the penalty would be up on their offside line, so 10 meters up the field, if that makes sense. Cool. But yeah, so those are probably, that offside one is probably a big management thing. Like that's probably when you need to be most vigilant of once that ball gets up there, and if it's all safe and well, if it's coming off the top, what about those players coming through the line out? What are they doing? So, yeah. One more thing, which I was probably going to talk about a bit more in our maul when I get to talking about the maul, but you see quite a lot of teams these days not engaging players, not engaging the opposition at the lineout when it comes to a maul. So I'm not going to go 100% into maul law right now, but if we just think about just the lineout aspects of it. So players, where are we? Yeah, I didn't pop it in here, but it rings true all the way from forming a line out. So players can't leave the line out until the line out's over, or until a ruck or maul is formed. So they can stand at the but they can't leave the line out and go back. So if you have two lines of players, and you have one team that's throwing the ball in and they want to form a maul, but the other team doesn't engage, that's fine. What they can't do though is they can't back away. So if they're moving away from the mark of touch to defend or do whatever they want to do, or they're backing off doing this and actually move away, then they can actually penalise them for moving away from and leaving the line out. It won't dive into the rabbit hole just right now of actually what are the implications of not forming the maul. That's another story for another day. But yeah, just keep that in mind in your decision-making process. Yeah, if opposition players move away from the line out, if they just stand there and don't engage, that's fine. But if they're moving away, that's a key point. That's your first infringement.
That's if the ball's at the front of that initiation of that maul starting from the attackers.
Yep.
Can they move forward? Can the attackers move forward?
If that ball's at the front, they can move forward. Yeah.
As far as but the opposition can't move backwards.
Well, if that ball's at the front, let's say if you think about it, so if that ball's at the very front, there's no more, right? So the second that they've got the ball at the front and then they move forward a little bit, past that mark of touch, line out's over.
Okay.
So the second they move over that the mark of touch, if there's no more formed, and then they're just a player running with the ball. They're just, they've got the ball, boom, running. But then the other players can do whatever they want. They can let them run through if they really want to.
Okay.
But yeah, but if
once the ball moves back towards the maul, at the back of the maul, sorry, but that defence line still hasn't engaged, they can't move forward.
That's right. Yeah. So that's getting into maul or definitely.
Okay.
If a team tries to set up a maul, the other team hasn't engaged, and they move the ball back, the referee should tell them to use it.
Okay.
And if they move forward, then they should actually just be not penalised, but just accidentally offside.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, because that actually does happen more often than not. Normally, teams will tell you, or if you're in your pre-match conversation, if it's a good team that has that play in their repertoire, they'll let you know. But yeah, say, hey, I'm going to do this. Can you watch that they're not engage, or we're not going to engage at the line out, or not engage that line out more. And so you kind of know. Sometimes it's coming, and so you can be clued into watching it. But of course, it always happens sometimes without that Cool. All good, guys. And thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. It's nice to have an audience. Again, I wasn't too sure if you're on the call before, but I was saying to Tiana, I was going to record these, create this resource anyway, and record these. So it was it's nice to be able to do it, do it live and have people to interact with, even if I wasn't sharing my screen to start with.
Can you hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I had a question as well.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Just you talked about extending the gap to 1.5 meters. Did you advocate doing that from the start of the game, or do you do that like if it's going wrong?
I 100%. If whatever you want your gap to be, if you want a slightly bigger gap, I'd do that right from the first line out. Because if you start trying to, you can do it if things start going a bit wrong, or if things start, it's best to preempt it and get it, start how you meant to carry on, kind of thing. So that first line out, take your time, like get there, like don't let them throw quickly. Just put your hand up and say, hooker, hold the ball. Get there at the front of the line out, talk to the players at the front of the line out for each one, because chances are they're always going to, more often than not, they're going to be the player at the front of the line out every time. So yeah, here's your mark, and get them to stand there and make a good, I always sort of make a good 60 centimeters, 60 plus centimeters off the mark of touch for each team. So here's your mark, and you set that all day, and then it'd be good. And then if you can, because then it's easy if you see them start to creep in or close up, then it's easy to double blow your whistle and say, hey, look, I showed you where it was before. Let me get back to that mark. That's easier. If you don't set that standard early, then it can be, a bit harder later on to be like, actually, guys, I'm going to need a bigger gap than this. They might do it, but it's you've already allowed a problem to occur before, or you allowed it to get messy. When you have a bigger gap, gosh, the lineouts are so much easier to manage, because then it takes out all the cluster. You can see if guys are jumping across. You can and not getting back. You can see if guys are grabbing someone else in the air. A lot easier, because naturally teams move together like this a bit anyway once that line out starts. So if they're starting here and then they're moving there, it's better than starting here than moving there, and then you got a mess. Yeah, that would be my take on it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, cheers.
Cool.
All right. See you
Well,
later
guys,
on.
hey,
Okay.
have a good morning, eh? Enjoy,
Yeah.
and
You too.
if you're on tonight, then I'll catch you then.
Yeah, see you then.
Yeah.
Cool.
See you later.
Cool.
Bye.
See you guys.
Cheers, bye.
Yeah.